Genesis chapter 13. Smaz and I think Rhea, my dad, and Em sang that for Father's Day, right? Was that the day? Genesis chapter 13. Thank you for being here. I know July is the easy month to skip out on church. You'll figure, well, a lot of people are on vacation. The pastor will assume we're also on vacation. We can get out. I think the air conditioning helps. I'm not going to lie. When I was a kid, July, if there was any Sunday night, we were hoping Mom and Dad would take a long Sunday afternoon nap. It was July. A lot of you don't know that, man. But July in this church, back, 20 years ago, when we put the air conditioning in. Before, pre-air conditioning years, man, there wasn't nothing to learn when you're a kid in church on a Sunday night. It was as hot as could get out, and man, it was because there's no shade here. We're just getting beat down, and then we had the windows. Remember the windows with the fans? We didn't have a sound system, so sometimes it was hard to hear Pastor because the semis going by in the 400, and sheesh. So we've taken that excuse out with air conditioning. So good decision, church. Back in 99, was it, Pastor? 99 we put the air conditioning in? A couple years after the addition, right? Was it? Well, it was a good decision. Good decision. All right. Genesis chapter 13. Abraham is the character we're going to look at. And what a character he is, isn't he? He's in Mesopotamia when he first shows up on the scene, or Ur of the Chaldees, as the book of Genesis tells us. You say, where is Mesopotamia, Ur of the Chaldees? Well, it's going to be southern Turkey, Iraq, somewhere around there is where we think Abraham and his family came from. And God calls out to him while he's there with his father and their family and says, I want you to leave your father's land. I want you to go somewhere else. I was reading through Acts 7 this morning in my devotions, and I noticed a detail I had not noticed before, but he had went with his father, and he did not leave his father till his father died. It was interesting to me. I thought he had left his father and his family, but he waited till his father died. Interesting detail there. Nonetheless, God calls his phone number and says, hey, I want you to pick up and leave. You're going to go to a land that I will tell you of. Very interesting truth there. A lot of times we won't get the answers that we're seeking until we take a step of faith. We often will wait until we know everything, until God gives us all the answers and everything's in place. But not in Abraham's case. God said, leave. I'll give you more details when you start going. Which, as a person, I would hate that. I like to have all my maps and everything in line before I leave. But God was saying, no, just get in the car. Just hit the accelerator. At some point down the 90, I'll tell you where to turn. Ooh, that's tough to do, but that's what he wanted him to do, and that was why he lived a life of faith. Abraham, of course, obeyed God, left his father's house, came into the land of Canaan, and he arrived in Shechem. Shechem is 30 miles north of what is now Jerusalem. That's where he first set up camp after leaving his father's house. And when he got to Shechem, he built an altar and called upon the name of the Lord. But he didn't stop there. He kept going a little further. He would build another altar unto God and call upon his name, but eventually would end up in Egypt. He would end up in Egypt because there was a famine at the time of his journeying. And when he got in Egypt, he got Husband of the Year award. In chapter 12, he said to his wife, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Well done, Abraham. However, it wasn't but seconds later he lost that award and said, how about you call me your brother? Can we do that? Because I don't want someone to kill me. That was the first time he went in there. He says, don't let anyone know you're my wife. They may kill me for you. And while he's down there, God protected, intervened in Sarah's life, spared her the emotional and physical harm that would have awaited her had God not done that. And Abraham would carry that marital blunder and his legacy for the rest of time. After being in Egypt, they would depart, and that's where we pick it up in verse number 1, Genesis chapter 13. And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. Now let me stop there and tell you he was rich in cattle, silver, and gold, certainly as a result of a long career. At this point, he was 75 plus years old. He had successfully developed his business. But God promised in chapter 12, verse number 2, to make him a great nation, to make him a great name. And so God was blessing him already. Verse number 3, and Abraham went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Verse 5, and Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Let me stop there and say in Genesis 12:3, God promised not only to bless Abraham, but he promised to bless those that bless him. Lot's going to be one of those guys. So God blessed Abraham, and God was blessing Lot with accumulated wealth. Verse 6, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen. Notice what he says. This is the reasoning for his request. For we be brethren. When there was a problem between the two workforces, Abraham responsibly came to Lot to address, to remedy the strife. He did not irresponsibly come to his beloved nephew for the strife. In other words, he didn't come to feed that strife, to contribute to that strife. He came responsibly and maturely to remedy that strife. You'll notice he didn't focus on who was right and who was wrong. He didn't focus on who was older and who was younger. He didn't focus on who was wealthier or who was healthier, who was superior or who was inferior. He didn't address the strife because of the need to maximize his profits. He didn't come to address the strife to maximize even his nephew's profits. He didn't come to Lot in order to protect his own reputation or even to protect the reputation of Lot. He didn't even come to help make his employees a better work environment. He didn't come to address Lot to make Lot's employees a better work environment. He came to his nephew to address the strife because he didn't want any strife for this sole reason. We be brethren. We be brethren. We're family. We're family. The sole motive behind Abraham's peacemaking efforts was because they were family, uncle and nephew. You see, by obedience to the call of God, Abraham learned a very, very valuable lesson in Genesis chapter 12. When God said, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house, Abraham learned this truth. Family is precious. Family is precious. He would now be in a land foreign to him. He would meet people foreign to him. He would be strangers to everyone, and everyone would be strangers to him. And isn't it true how unfortunate it is, but we typically don't realize how valuable our treasures are until they are taken from us. We are so very guilty of taking people for granted in our lives, and nothing awakens us to that sad fact like distance, disease, or death. Abraham learned not to take family for granted by death. Do you know his baby brother Haran died before he left the land of Ur? That was Lot's father. Lot understood that. Lot and his uncle Abraham were like father and son. They realized by losing a loved one how precious family was. And they now learned by distance how precious family was. They had only themselves. It was Abraham, Sarah, and Lot, and I'm assuming Lot's wife. That's all they had. And this is well before the time, of course, where you can hop on a flight and be home to visit family in just a few hours. This is well before you could hop into a car and be home in 8 hours to visit family. We couldn't get on the phone and make a phone call. We couldn't grab the phone back then and do a video chat. You couldn't send an email. You couldn't send postcards. There weren't pictures. There weren't photography going on to keep up on things. There wasn't a social media page in which they could stay in touch. This was a whole different time. Abraham's family was long gone, far, far away in a distant land. And so when he said, let there be no strife between me and thee, for we be brethren. We're all we've got. We're all we've got. You can pick your friends in life, but you can't pick your family. You can pick your spouse, but once you pick her or him, you can't pick your immediate family. You can pick how many children you have in many cases, but once you conceive, you can't pick your children anymore. Your spouse is who they are. Your children are who they are, if you have them. Your mother and father are who they are. Your sisters and brothers are who they are, and the list goes on and on. But we only get one mama. We only get one daddy. If you have sisters and brothers, that's all you get. You have no choice in that. If you have a spouse, and I pray you do, ideally that's all you get. Strangers are a dime a dozen. Co-workers come and go. Neighbors move in and move out. Friends even will come and go. And so what do husbands and wives need to remember? What do parents and children need to remember? What do brothers and sisters need to remember? Man, we be family. We be family. It's different than everybody else in the world. We share the same blood. We share the same name. We share the same heritage. We share the same life. Now, what we're about to talk about tonight is not a message on creating intimate family relationships. It's a whole different topic. This is a message on preserving family relationships. If we cannot preserve our relationships with our loved ones, we can never develop intimate relationships. So it's important we learn how to preserve a marriage, preserve a family relationship. Abraham was desperate to preserve his relationship with Lot. And if you too want to preserve your relationship with your family member, number one, identify strife as the risk. Identify strife as the risk. Look what he says again in verse 8. Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. If you just take a step back and appreciate this simple verse, this simple statement Abraham gave to Lot, you'll see that he didn't rush up to Lot and say, what's going on around here? He didn't rush up and say, what's wrong with your herdmen? He didn't come in and accuse Lot's herdmen of doing anything wrong, nor did he come in defending himself or his herdmen. He didn't come in and accuse Lot of any bad business decisions, nor did he defend his own. You'll also notice that there is nothing in this statement that would address the core problem, the root of the problem. You say, what's the root of the problem? They had a space issue. There wasn't enough space for everybody. But he doesn't say anything about that. He comes in, he says, hey, Lot, let there be no strife between me and thee, between my herdmen and your herdmen. Question, how many family relationships get torn apart simply because there is no commitment to eliminating strife? How many marriages fail simply because they don't see strife as dangerous and harmful to their marriage? Let me explain. Strife is rarely seen as harmful. I think the average family member sees strife as an unavoidable byproduct of some deeper cause. I think the average spouse sees strife as this unavoidable, natural response to some deeper problem. You made me do it, I guess. You know, you make me this way. You make me so angry. Or you did that, and so I can just talk to you however I want. Do you know strife is a decision? Strife is something we choose to do. Strife is contending in anger. Strife is the struggle for superiority. Strife may be automatic for some, but it is not involuntary. It is a voluntary response to someone else's decision or behavior. Let me explain it this way. Let's use the household where the wife assumes the responsibility of doing the laundry for everyone. I now have to phrase it that way because I found out that families are very sensitive to what they do in the home. And if I were to dare say, well, you know, my mom did the laundry. Oh, are you saying I have to do the laundry? Oh, you can do what you want, all right? But let's just assume your house, Your mama, your wife, is the one who does the laundry, okay? And husband goes into the bathroom to take a shower. There's no towels in there. And he asks a question. Where are all the towels? Okay, a question has been asked because there's a problem. There are no towels, and he's in the bathroom ready to take a shower. And the wife responds, they're all dirty right now. Simple conversation, right? Where are the towels? They're all dirty now. Husband then responds with, not that difficult to have clean towels in the bathroom. Now, that was a decision to respond that way. But in his mind, he's responding to the root problem. She doesn't have towels that are clean for me. Wife responds, if it's not that difficult, do it yourself. Right? She's responding now to his response. The root problem is he's being too critical, and in his mind, she's being too lazy or whatever he wants to accuse her of, right? But both responses are a voluntary decision to encourage handling a problem with strife. No one made him be condescending, and no one made her be disrespectful, correct? They chose to both respond that way, and what they don't realize, they've introduced strife into their family and their marriage relationship, and they're both blaming it on the root. Well, she didn't do the towels. I can talk this way. Well, he has no business talking to me that way, so I can talk to him that way. That is the decision to choose strife. And few couples recognize the risk of allowing strife into their marriage. It is not automatic. It is not involuntary. It is not unavoidable. Strife is a decision. Strife, regardless of the reason, is dangerous to any relationship. Problems are unavoidable in many cases, but strife is always avoidable. Disagreements will be unavoidable. I don't care who you are, how perfect you may think you are, or your spouse, or your parents, or your siblings, but disagreements will happen. Problems will take place. Differences, which are very natural, will take place. I want you to think of the situation Abraham and Lot are in. The problem they had was not wrong. No one did anything wrong. In fact, I'm going to blame Abraham and Lot's problem on God. Can I do that? Abraham comes into Canaan. Why is he there? Who called him there? God did, right? God brought Abraham into Canaan. You'll notice in verse 7 that the Bible says the Canaanites and the Perizzites were there. Why does that detail matter? It's to tell you there were a lot of people there and they only had so much room to be together. That's God's problem. God brought Abraham into the land of the Canaanites and the Perizzites. So God brought him there. Who blessed Abraham with all of his wealth? The increase in servants, the increase in cattle, the silver and gold. Who did that? God did. Genesis chapter 12, verse number 2. Who increased all of Lot's possessions, all of Lot's wealth, his herdmen, his cattle, his silver and gold? Who blessed Lot? Genesis 12, 3. God did. So God blesses Abraham, gets a bigger estate. God blesses Lot, gets a bigger estate, but they can't expand their family because God brought them into Canaan, and there's Canaanites and Perizzites everywhere. So God created this problem. Problems are inevitable. Problems are not always a result of somebody doing anything wrong. Problems are a result of life. I think right around here we have a good problem. It's called space. Right? Attendance is at a sustainable higher number, which means we have a space problem. People tell me all the time, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about this? We have this problem and that problem. Listen, it's a good problem to have. And you know who's creating that problem? God is. God is. But Abraham and Lot had an issue because there wasn't enough room for their settlement. And Abraham didn't say to Lot, Lot, we've got to do something about this space problem. He first said, let there be no strife. You know why? Because you can't solve a problem if you're at odds with one another. You can't solve a problem if you're contentious with one another. Let's talk about marriage. When a man and a woman marry, there will be bold, capital, highlighted letters, problems. Anytime a man and a woman come together and decide they're going to live together, there's going to be massive problems. Paul said it. Hey, if you get married, you haven't done anything wrong. but there will be trouble in the flesh. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. That's what he said. I don't use that verse at wedding ceremonies, but that's exactly what the Bible says. Right? Why will there be trouble in the flesh? Because men and women have very different thoughts on the same topic. Men and women have very different feelings on the same issue. Men and women have very different expectations, very different perspectives. This is true for sibling relationships. This is true for parents and adult children. We all have different minds, different eyes, different souls. There will be problems in every relationship. Difference of opinions, difference of perspective, difference of expectations. And so I say again, problems are unavoidable. Strife, on the other hand, is a decision, and it is most certainly avoidable. I'm just combing through my notes. I have a lot of notes tonight. I don't want to keep you forever. I know I've said this many times, but it's worth hearing again, especially for young couples. But problems in a marriage are not a sign of a troubled marriage. In fact, they're the sign of a healthy marriage. The sign of a troubled marriage is the inability to work through those problems. Most marriages fail not because of problems, but because they can't sit down and work through them. You say, why can't they sit down and work through them? Because most couples don't know it, but they choose strife as the primary means of dealing with those problems. You know, it's nearly impossible to make peace when hot heads are negotiating it. It's nearly impossible to perform heart surgery when the surgeon's hands are shaking with rage. You know, we just forget that to solve a problem, we've got to first decide not to have any strife. Well, the strife is a result of... No, it's not. No, it's not. It's your decision to be full of contention. Strife has to be dealt with before problems can be dealt with. Couples that fail, marriages in particular, fail because they live under a sustained level of stress. It's called strife stress. Any builder knows that when you build a structure, if you put all the stress on one portion or one element, it's going to eventually collapse. Nothing can handle a sustained amount of stress. It has to be spread out. And a marriage cannot handle a sustained amount of strife stress. It will eventually break. I have this ridiculous theory that I'll hold to, and no one can convince me otherwise, but I believe there are few problems in this world that cannot be successfully fixed. I know that there are very complicated issues in this world. I know relationships can be very complicated, but I have this idea that two adults should be able to sit down and work through any problem as long as they can control their emotions. Is that crazy? Because don't we tell our kids, you got to figure out how to make it work? Don't we put them in the same room and say, you guys have to figure out how to get along because it's going to be 18 long years? Yet mom and dad can't figure out how to do that because they can't sit down for more than 5 minutes without yelling at each other. I've been in counseling sessions where I've told one of the spouses, usually the husband, because of the situation, I'll say, listen, you need to sit down on the couch and you need to tell your wife, I'll be here for as long as I need to be here, but when you're ready to sit down and hold my hand and talk to me, we'll work through any problem you've got. But until you're ready to sit down and calmly listen and calmly talk and we'll hold hands and we'll work it out, let's not bother having this conversation because it won't go anywhere. Does that sound unreasonable? Shouldn't we be able to do that, people? We don't go to work and treat anyone else the way we treat our spouses, do we? In fact, in a workplace environment, we're expected to sit down, respect each other, and talk through problems. Why? Because we got to make it work. Well, the marriage is no different. We've got to sit down and make it work. So we should have a family rule in our households that should be, let there be no strife between us, for we be family. I think it's real easy to argue. It's really easy to fight. It's really easy to be contentious. It's really easy to be condescending. It's really easy to counter every argument with a sarcastic or exaggerated response. It's easy to point out flaws. It's easy to tear down the proposed remedy. Strife, frankly, is easy, but it accomplishes nothing. It accomplishes nothing good. If we can't discuss something without the presence of strife, if we can't debate something without the presence of strife, if we can't disagree over something without the presence of strife, then why bother having that conversation? Because it will go nowhere. Strife or peace? Choose very carefully. Your family relationship depends on it. Let's look at verse number 9 and look at the second point. If you want to preserve family relationships, you need to initiate sacrifice as the remedy. Abraham says this after saying, let there be no strife between us and our workforces. He says, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. Lot meant an awful lot to Abraham, didn't he? I think Lot meant a ton to Abraham. I think he saw, remember, Abraham at this stage does not have a child. So Lot is his son, if you would, his child. And yet he's much older, much wiser, I assume more wealthy. He's the patriarch, he's the uncle. And yet he says, hey, buddy, you pick where you want to go, I'll go somewhere else, but we can't be together. There's just not enough room for us. There's no place in the land of the Canaanites and the Perizzites that we can be together. There's just not enough room. We can't find a lot that can handle our estates and our herds. So you pick where you want, and I'll go the other way. Wow. He was so willing to preserve his family relationship that he was willing to have his wife, his tents moved somewhere else based on the decision of Lot. He was so in love with his family, Lot, that he was willing to take his business, his estate, somewhere else. What an amazing man Abraham was. He just knew the tight space was going to lead to more problems. It was going to make people more uncomfortable, and we have to do something. So let's move on. He didn't wait until Lot suggested that they give each other more space. He didn't wait until Lot suggested that they do that and ask the awkward question, well, who goes where? Who gets to decide what? He initiated the remedy. Once he said there's going to be no strife in this conversation, no strife in this relationship, no contention, we're going to make sure we fix this. We're going to protect and preserve our relationship. Here's my remedy. Here's my proposal, Lot. You pick wherever you want, and I'll go somewhere else. Why? Why would he do that? Because we be brethren. Our relationship, dear Lot, is more important than our businesses. We're not business partners. We're not neighbors. We're not co-workers. We're not mere friends. We're family. Abraham didn't have to be right. He didn't have to be best. And he didn't have to be first. He could and would be second. He could and would be less. He could and would have it Lot's ways. Man, what would our marriages look like if the only arguments that took place were about who could make the other person have their way? And wouldn't it be nice if marriages and families, when we got together at night, we couldn't figure out what to watch on TV because we all wanted the other person to pick? We couldn't pick what to have for dinner because, no, you pick what you want. No, you pick. No, I really want you to be happy. No, I want you to be happy. Instead, it's what I want. No, I want to sit there. No, I want to do that. It's all about, we're so self-absorbed. It's incredible. Frank Sinatra, he did it his way, didn't he? Didn't he? You know how many marriages he had? 4. Do you know how many relationships that were notable he had in that time in addition to his marriages? 6. You do it your way, you're going to be lonely. If you do it your way, you're going to have broken relationships. Period. There's just no way around it. The more self-absorbed we are, the more our relationships are threatened. We have to do it Lot's way, as Abraham. He said, I'll do it your way. I'll do it your way. You know what word has become a dirty word in our society? And it really does sound so bad when I say it. You ready? Cover your ears. Submission. Ooh. Right? Submission. Ooh, I don't have to submit to anybody. I'm my own boss. I'm my own king. I'm not going to be beneath you. Submission is the most biblical way to inheriting a great relationship. Now, you may be assuming we're talking about husbands and wives. Yes, Ephesians chapter 5 definitely refers to husbands as the head of the home, as Christ is the head of the church, and wives are to submit to the husbands as the church submits to Christ. Yes, but before Paul even addresses that relationship, he says in Ephesians 5:21, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. You know, we're all supposed to submit to each other. Doesn't matter what the relationship is. Peter teaches the need for younger people to submit to those who are elder. Listen to what he says. He says in 1 Peter 5:5, likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Truth. Yea, he says, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility, for God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. And so I can say this based on those two verses. A lack of submission to your husband is a manifestation of pride, and God resisteth the proud. A lack of submission to your wife is a manifestation of pride, and God resisteth the proud. A lack of submission to your parents is a manifestation of pride, and God resisteth the proud. Parents, a lack of submission to your adult children is a manifestation of pride. God resisteth the proud. Sisters, a lack of submission to your sister or brother is a manifestation of pride. God resisteth the proud. Brothers, a lack of submission to your brother or sister also is a manifestation of pride, and God resisteth the proud. Self-sacrifice is the act of clothing yourself with humility. No sacrifice is the act of clothing yourself with pride. Solomon wrote in Proverbs 13:10, only by pride cometh contention. You have a contentious relationship in somewhere in your home, in your family, somebody, both of you probably, has too much pride. Why are our families falling apart? Because our robes of humility are hanging in the closet. Why are our marriages falling apart? Because our suits and dresses of humility are hanging in the closet. The more absorbed we come with ourselves, the more pride we put on. The more pride we put on, the more contentious we become. And relationships fizzle away. If it has to be your way, then expect to be lonely by the time you die. If it has to be your idea, then expect to be broken. If you have to be right all the time, then expect others to walk away. And if you're unwilling to give up something you love to keep the peace, then get used to eating alone. And if you're unwilling to let someone else make decisions for you, then plan on loneliness. If the Bible tells us only by pride cometh contention, then we can reasonably conclude only by humility comes peace. Self-sacrifice is the preservative of family relationships. Humility and submission are in the same bottle of preservatives. Abraham was willing to let his younger nephew make decisions that would shape his future and his family. Say, why did he do that? Why did he humble himself? He didn't have to. He was the patriarch. He's the uncle. He's the man of God. He didn't have to do that. Look at what Lot chose anyways. Lot was a selfish man. He did that because we be family. We be brethren. My relationship with you, dear Lot, is more important than my will, my expectations. We be brethren. Look at verse 10. This is the rest of the story. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, which was hilly, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, which was a fertile valley. And Lot pitched his tent toward Sodom, but the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Now, I imagine some of you have a relationship in your head as we talk about this, assuming you're engaged. Is the sister, the brother, the husband, the wife, maybe the father or mother, or your son or daughter. And you know them. And you say to yourself, if I self-sacrifice, if I let them make decisions, if I put myself on the altar and let them do what they want, they'll just keep taking and taking. You might be thinking if you do that, they'll suck you dry. You might be thinking if I do that, it'll be miserable, I'll have nothing left. Or maybe you're thinking it's just not fair. I've given long enough. It's time for them to give up some things. Well, I want you to see in Genesis 13, Abraham's example is, I hope, an encouragement to you, because if you make your life about other people, if you're willing to put other people first as Abraham did, you'll inherit a big fat blessing from God. Verse number 14, and the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, that is not a small detail. What God's about to say, he waited till after Lot left. Lift up now thine eyes and look from the place where thou art, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. Then Abram removed his tent, and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. Because Abraham identified strife as a risk to his relationship with Lot, because he initiated self-sacrifice as the remedy to this strife, well, God blessed him, and he inherited space as the reward. Not only did he preserve the friendship, the relationship between him and Lot when he did this, but he inherited the great blessing of God. The timing here is very important to note scripturally. Genesis chapter 12, God says, come out. When he does it, he says, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to give you the land. But that's as far as he went. At one spot in Canaan, he said to Abram, this is going to be your land. But that's all he said. We get to Genesis 13, and God is, I believe, testing Abraham again. And because of their wealth and because of the space issues, he's going to watch how Abraham handles this. And he handles it exceptional. He handles it with humility. He puts family first. That relationship is more important than his possessions, his wealth, his estate. And because he did that, as soon as Lot left Abraham, and Abraham had a moment to say, ooh, that did not go so well for me. I was hoping he'd pick the desert, and I'd get to the fertile land. After all, I'm the uncle. But after Lot leaves, God says, well done, because you've done that. I want you to look as far as you can see north, as far as you can see south, as far as you can see east and west. That's all yours, buddy. You say, what did God just do? God just showed him how much land. Yes, Lot got the better land at the moment, but God gave Abraham the greater land. But here's the bigger lesson. What did God say in this passage? As soon as Lot left him, Abraham preserved that relationship, put himself second. God says, I'm going to give you seed, and it's going to be as many as the stars of heaven. Now think about this. What's God doing? God's saying, because you value family, because you value relationships, you've got a lot more coming, kiddo. I've just given you space to grow your family. Now, you can argue that the relationship with Abraham and Lot didn't become any more intimate, and it didn't. In fact, there's not a lot scriptural that shows they're that much closer going forward, although Abraham would save Lot in Genesis 14, maybe, I forget. But in Genesis 19, Abraham would mediate for Lot, so there's still a relationship. He preserved it, but I don't know if they're any closer. What Abraham does get, though, is the promise in more detail. Listen, you're going to have a kid, but you're going to have so many offspring, so many more relationships to build, so much more room to grow that you're going to be blessed. God knew he chose the right man for his plan. God chose a man who valued family relationships to start his family. God chose a man who sacrificed to preserve family relationships to start God's family. God chose a man who humbled himself. God chose a man who would lay a foundation for family preservation. Is that important to God? Absolutely. God was going to give Abraham Isaac. Isaac was going to give his wife Jacob. Jacob was going to give his wife 12 sons, and those 12 sons would expand. And of that line of Judah, Jesus Christ would come. And if the nation of Israel was built upon the back of a man who did not value family and value family relationships, then who's to say they'd make it long enough for the seed, the promised one, to come? You see, God picked a man who set the precedent, set the example. We be family. We stick together. We sacrifice what's necessary to preserve our relationships. God blessed him because of his humility. And I'd like to remind everyone tonight that no matter what relationship you may be struggling with, it may be marital, it may be sibling, it may be parent and child, whatever it is, make decisions based on that relationship, but make decisions based on God's expectation of you. You may look at that person and say, well, I know what I got to do, and this will be better for them, or this will be better for us. No, make a decision based on what God wants you to do. 1 Peter 5:5, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Most of the time, people respond very well to humility. Most of the time. People don't respond well to pride, ever. But most of the time, they respond well to humility. Not all the time, but here's the nice thing. God always responds to humility. God always blesses humility. You may not see the results in your spouse or your sister or your brother or your mother or father. You may not see results in your daughter or son, but you can be sure that God is going to bless you. Anytime you engage pride in a relationship, God is going to resist you. He's going to push at you. And you want to inherit God's blessings. Strained family relationships. I'm done with this thought, so you can pay attention and we'll get you out of here. But I want to add this thought to encourage some of you who I know are going through a hard time. But strained family relationships are never isolated to just those two people. So children in a strained marriage are impacted, right? Two sisters may go at it, but it's never just isolated to that. We take sides. We are guilted into picking a corner, or parents are trying to mediate. Other siblings are trying to mediate. Whatever may happen, it's never just you and him. Never just you and her. Never. Never. Don't ever say, well, this is just between us. Stay out of it. Doesn't work that way. In a family, it can't be that way. Abraham and Lot, their relationship was preserved. It was not made any better, but it was preserved. But my argument in this passage is the other relationships that Abraham would yet have would be the ones that would truly benefit. And you may be the wife who's married to a doofus. You may be the spouse who's married to a real nasty woman. And you may employ humility and get nowhere. Listen very carefully. You have no idea the blessings you are reaping elsewhere. A child who sees his father refuse to submit to his mother is going to have a strained relationship with the father. A daughter who sees her mother refuse to submit to her father, being the husband of the child, that child will look at the mother differently. You see, humility produces more relationships elsewhere. You may not get anywhere with that one, but there's a host of people who are watching who are going to say, oh, I like that person. I like what they're doing. I can be closer to that one. How many of you have a proud brother or sister, or a proud uncle or aunt, or a proud person that you see treat people contentiously, have no humility with? Are you not quick to step back from them just by watching? Are you not quick to say, if she's willing to say that about her, what does she say about me? And so, don't focus on growing a relationship when it comes to employing humility. Focus on preserving that relationship and pleasing God, who in return, I believe, will give you space to grow other relationships. What you do with a contentious family member will have an impact on the rest of the family, whether they be children, siblings, parents, so on and so forth. Humility keeps family relationships intact. period. Humility allows for a relationship to hopefully reconcile or grow. Pride crushes it. I always wake you up when I do that. Some of you are sleepers. Pride crushes relationships. You may be right, but you'll be lonely. Fall on your face before somebody. But don't expect anything in return. Just know you're pleasing God. And God will bless you for it. Why choose humility? Why choose peace? Why resist strife? Why initiate self-sacrifice as the remedy? Because we be family. We be family. You can say all you want about your friends who will be there at your deathbed, but typically your friends don't show up. Your family, though, your family. I don't think 100 friends could replace one of my children on my deathbed. In fact, the whole world can stay away. It's my kids I want. It's my wife I want. Family. You only get one shot. We be family. Let's have a word of prayer. Stand with me if you would.